Hi, my name is Guido. You might remember me from making that asado on Jocelyn's presentation. I'm way prouder about that asado than this paper, though. So we were working on calibration, right, and confidence scores. We're making the continuation for this paper, where they presented novel ways to get the metric on how confident a model was about their answers, right? So, for instance, this is a very straightforward task, just a question answering on non-ambiguous questions. So, for instance, here is who is the director of Scarface? And then you use the typical few shot prompt, and then you prompt the language model in the middle, right? So the usual way that confidence scores are calculated in the literature are just multiplying the logits, the softmax logits and whatever, and you get the likelihood score. So this paper implemented this newer ways to implement confidence scores. That's called sampling repetition, sampling diversity, where you prompt the model several times, and if the model, for example, answers the same several times, it might mean that it's more confident about their answer, right? So here, sampling repetition is 4 out of 5 because it answers Brian De Palma 4 of the 5 times. This is the data set, right? It's called Trivia QA, and you just get, as I said, straightforward question and answerings, right? So you get a question, for example, what was the Egyptian president who was assassinated in 1981? And you get a list of accepted answers, right? So Sadat with lowercase, and what's the voltage of the AAA battery? And you just get a list of possible answers. And when you prompt the model, you might get something like this, right? So Anwar Sadat, approximately 1.5 volts. These are obviously correct, right? In fact, it might give you more information, but the classification is wrong, right? Because this literature, in this area, usually exact match is used to classify correct answers. So I was curious about how the scores changed when you selected different ways to classify correct answers. We got all of this. You don't have to know them. You don't have to read them. These are the most commonly used ones. The one on the bottom is the most computationally heavy one, right? Where it's an actual language model. So I set all those different ways to classify correct answers, and I got way different confidence scores. And I said, okay, so all these results might be very, very wrong, or they might change a lot when the way that we classify correct answers, right? For instance, in this graph, you have the diagonal as perfect performance, because when you have on the bottom left, it means that it has low confidence, but the answers are wrong. That's okay, that's a good thing. And if you have, for example, a 60% confidence, you might expect for 60% of the results there to be right. So the diagonal would be the perfect performance. And you can see that using different ways to determine how the answers were correctly or not. You get a bottom, or you get overconfidence, you get underconfidence, so it's changed a lot. But then we got to the part where we actually run the evaluation metrics, right? So I wanted to see, oh, now I got them. I got all these different ways to measure this information. I can write a paper about how all this research is wrong. But then I got this. All the evaluation metrics were almost exactly the same, right? Even the exact same floating point number. It was super, super weird. So so this is the weird part. This is the thing that I'm most concerned about, how these evaluation metrics actually look like a perfect octagon, right? So it means that all these different metrics actually give the same score, even though the accuracy is way different. So for instance, now here in the right, we created a human annotation of how those answers were right or wrong, right? That we can trust. We ran two different annotators, and they were like 99.9% confident on the same things. So all these different ways to classify correct answers gave way different percentages of accuracy respected to the human annotation. For instance, BERT score gave the worst score, 79.1, and BEM score gave 94.7 accuracy of human performance. But as you can see in this table, here, BERT score and BEM score, the same, right? So 34, 34, 35, 35, 30, 30, right? So the conclusions of my paper is, don't take the task of classifying correct answers lightly, because you might have this case that, okay, we'll just use BERT score. We might just use BEM score because we have that, we just programmed that. And we have and we have extremely similar conclusions, but we have tons of relative error between them. So my conclusion is that you should employ a human annotation, and you should actually qualitatively assess your answers and your results. Don't just take the metric. That's the thing that I learned the most. Thanks.
Is there a quantitative, like an automatic solution?
I mean, I'd love to give you that. I'd love it. But I think that's the main conclusion, that I think there will never be a perfect way to do this automatically. So the main point, I think, is that we should not try to avoid using human annotators. We should not avoid to just automatize everything. These are subtle things. And this is actually a problem that sounds way too easy, right? It sounds trivial. And it has very different performances on actual state-of-the-art models. And still, we might get way different results, right? So no, I think I hope there is, but I don't think there is.
But the problem is only occurring when you ask a language generating model to solve a classification problem, right? Like if you do classification, you don't have this problem. Can you ask the model if it's smart enough to not give a free-form answer and like choose only between a number of options as you do with classification? There are only a limited number of options.
Yeah, I think in that case, you would not have this problem, but you are very constrained on the type of tasks you're asking, right? Okay. But if you are in a free form, that's why in the title was like open question, because this is like a very, very common task. And definitely, I'd love for all tasks to be like very discreetly answered.
Yeah, but I can imagine that they're really not so.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Thank you.